What's up, my dudes, and welcome back to another episode of The Panda Chronicles. On today's adventure, we'll be talking about Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18th, 1949, in Salt Lake, Utah. Gary Ridgway grew up very poor. He didn't have a lot of money and he didn't live in the best neighborhoods, but he still made it. In 1982, a lot of runaways and prostitutes were getting abducted and disappearing off Route 99 in South King Country, Washington. Most times he would bring them home, rape them, and then strangle them. He would dump their bodies along the Green River. Gary Ridgway hid from police until 2001. His killing started in 1982. Gary Ridgway's home life was very troubling. A lot of family members and relatives would say that his mom was very demeaning and very violent. Ridgway also wet the bed until the age of 13. After each episode, his mom would take him into the bathtub and scrub his genitals. He later stated that he felt a strong hatred and a strong sexual attraction to his mother. He also fantasized about killing his mother. His father was a bus driver, and Ridgway would accompany him on the bus rides, and his father would always complain about the number of prostitutes going up and how he didn't want them in the neighborhood and how he despised them. Ridgway was also considered dyslexic and was held back a year in high school. They also said his IQ was in the low 80s. When Ridgway was 16, he lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him through his ribcage into his liver. The boy survived, but being so traumatized at the event, he did not ID Ridgway. After Ridgway graduated high school, he married his 19-year-old girlfriend, Claudia Craig. After high school, he enrolled in the Navy and went to Vietnam. When he served on a supply ship, he did see combat, but he was mainly on the ship the entire time. During his time in the war, he sought out prostitutes, and without protection, he contracted gonorrhea. And this really infuriated him, so he purposefully had sex with more prostitutes without protection to also give them gonorrhea. While Ridgway was away in the Navy, his wife also had an affair. So when he got back, they decided to get a divorce. His second wife, Marcy, I think it's Winslow. Again, I'm sorry, I'm butchering the names. Stated that in their marriage he became very, very, very religious, to the point where he insisted that she follow the strict rules as well. That marriage also ended in affairs on both parties, but he had a child with Marcy, a boy named Matthew. All of his wives and ex-girlfriends always stated that Ridgway had a sex addiction, that he always wanted sex, he demanded it every day, he needed it at least a couple times a day just to get through the day. Even went as far as wanting them to do it in public places, like at the park or in the subway or in the bathroom. He just wanted it in public areas. Between 1980 and 1990, Gary Ridgway ended up raping and murdering 71 women and teenage girls, prostitutes and runaways near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. He always dumped them in the same location of the Green River. Sometimes he would come back weeks later and again have sex with their bodies. Ridgway often contaminated the dump sites with gum or cigarettes or notes that belonged to someone else. He even transported some victims' remains across state lines to Portland, Oregon to confuse the police. Gary Ridgway would begin each murder by picking up a runaway or prostitute. Sometimes he would have his kids' toys in the front seat, or he'd show them his license, but he'd cover up where he lived, and the picture, the license, how it holds in your wallet, the picture right across from it was him and his son. So that was to gain their trust. So they're like, oh, well, he's a family man, so I can trust to get in the car with him. Or, oh, he has a kid, so he's not going to be a serial killer. Then he'd take them to a remote location, have sex with them, and strangle them. He first started to strangle with his hands, But after getting bruises and scratchings on his hands that he couldn't explain, he started using ligatures, rope, shoelaces, stuff like that. The King Country Sheriff Department made a Green River task force to help do anything they could. So they redid the DNA, they re-inspected everything. Ted Bundy even gave his opinions and thoughts about the serial killer, saying that he was probably revisiting the sites where the victims were dumped to have sex with the bodies because they can't reject it. So maybe he was doing it so he wasn't trying to kill more. And he ended up being right about that. In 1982, Gary Ridgway was arrested for prostitution, and he became a suspect for the Green River Killer. But in 1984, he took a polygraph test and he passed. Now, everybody should know this by now. Polygraph tests are very inconclusive. They aren't right. I mean, even if you're nervous or if you're anxious, it'll spike and it'll say that you're lying when you're not. You're just nervous, or you're just scared. Like, it detects the slightest thing as a lie. So those aren't really reliable. On April 7th, 1987, they took hair and saliva samples from Gary Ridgway. His next and final wife, Judith Mawson, said that when they were dating, she moved in and he had no carpet, and that he would wake up way earlier than he should have to go to work. And whenever she asked him about it, he said that he was getting overtime. But she didn't really have any suspicions. She said that he was very religious, very nice, very forthcoming, so she didn't ever question anything. But later on, she realized that he didn't have any carpet because he most likely rolled up a victim in it, and that he was doing his hunting and murdering during the hours that he said he was getting overtime. She also stated that she didn't watch TV at the time, so she didn't even know there was a serial killer, loose. She didn't know. She just didn't watch the news. She didn't do anything. She just did her job and came home. Gary Ridgway also stated that after he married Judith, his number of killings went down very little. While he was married to her, he only murdered 3 people because he truly loved her, and he knew that this was going to get in the way and he had to stop it to be with her. The samples they took from him in 1987 kept getting pushed back, and they probably went to a warehouse and were never tested. But finally, in 2001, the samples of his hair and his saliva were tested, and was a match to the victims. On November 30th, 2001, he was at his job and the police showed up and arrested him. On December 30th, 2003, Judge Richard Jones sentenced Gary Ridgway to life in prison without possibility of parole. In prison, there have been numerous interviews where he has stated that the police say he's killed 71 people, but he knows he's killed more than that. Gary Ridgway is still in prison to this day. He is still in prison. He will be till he dies. Another body was found by the Green River in 2011, and another life sentence was added on to Gary Ridgway's sentencing. He was not sentenced to death because of the deal he made with the police. He told the police that he would give them the locations of the bodies for not receiving the death penalty, and they agreed. Alright guys, that concludes this episode of the Panda Chronicles. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and leave a comment down below about who you want me to talk about next. Alright guys, I guess I'll see you later. Bye! 1949. Damn. He hasn't died yet?